Hey there nation, welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and we are back with another edition of Commander Cheapskate Reviews. And as you can see, we're doing a little screenshot of my laptop, and the reason why we're doing that is because today we are reviewing a brand new product which is brought out by Gamesworkshop, which is Necromunda's House of Blades. This is the latest installment of their gang books for Necromunda, the tabletop skirmish war game. So as you can see right here, we have the cover of the House of Blades. This book is specifically for Escher Gangs, who will be playing in Necromunda. This is the second, I think, gang book that the Gamesworkshop has made so far. The first one was House of Chains for House Goliath. This one is for House Escher. The next one coming out, I believe, is the House of Steel and House of Iron, I believe, and that one is for the Orlocks. And then, of course, I think in the core they have another one coming out for Van Star. So it looks like the plan here is to release a gang book for each of the different gangs that you can play within Necromunda as well. So today's customers game review will be looking at this product. We'll be going through the book, talk about its contents, what are some of the pros and cons about this whole system, and what kind of new things you can find, and determine whether this is a good buy for you to use or not for your games of Necromunda. So that being said, let's get this video review on a roll. Alright, so here's the cover for the House of Blades. It's going to talk about exactly what this book contains. We're just going to move on to the next page here. Going to move on down here. So here we go with the table of contents, as you can see. Now this book is actually kind of interesting because it breaks down the book into different sections. That's going to be probably the most important to you. Probably the most important thing is the House Escher gang list. It's probably be the most important part of you. It's going to talk about the different fighters that you have in the gang, what kind of rules you have for those guys, what kind of equipment they can take, as well as some of the new gang rules that they have for the different fighters. And of course, this is the ebook version of the House of Blades, so I will bring that up right now. The other part that I'll talk about too, I'm usually going to stick to this part, is the history as well as the background of House Escher. We're really not going to spend too much time talking about the fluff of this product, just because, you know, fluff is fluff, it's fiction. You know, based on your own personal preference about fictional material, you know, that's on you. I'm just going to review the rules and the meatier portions of this as well. So because that, we also have that as well. Now, just like you'd had in the previous edition of the House of Chains, of course, it goes more detail about the different hang-arounds and brutes that you can hire for your gang as well, which is also really awesome too. And it also talks about the different hired guns you can use. And probably one of the coolest things about this one, of course, is just like in the House of Chains, it talks about whatever guild alliances that this gang has. So it talks about the Water Guild. That's the primary guild that the trading guild that House Escher actually has a relationship with. It also talks about the Cold Traders, which are basically the criminal elements that they deal a lot with as well. So we have both, you know, factions from the Book of Misrule, from the Book of Judgment, where they talk about the different criminal organizations you can work from. We also have the guilds from the House of the Book of Peril that they also had as well. So that part is really cool. It talks about a little bit more in detail about their alliances and some additional boons and some things that you get from being a Escher player who makes alliances with those. And of course, we also have House Ulanti, which is actually the name of the house that rules over Necromunda. They actually have a really strong relationship with those guys. And I believe in the Book of Chains, I believe that group is called House Krieg, I believe that they were called. Anyways, what ends up happening is, it looks like that's the typical layout that they have for these books for the different gangs. You have gang information specifically for your gang. You have a different information about your brutes and hang-arounds and hired guns, and it also talks about your guild, criminal, as well as noble house alliances that you can have for your campaign as well, which is really, really cool there. Of course, you also have additional information like additional subplots that you can use for your games of Dominion campaign as well. We also have some things like some favors that you also pull off at the same time as well. And probably the most important part about this, we have a brand new skill called Finesse, which is a brand new skill that is exclusive to the Escher Gangs. So that part is really, really cool. In the Book of Chains with the House Goliath guys, I believe theirs was called Muscle, was the name of the skill. This one has Finesse. So it looks like every single gang will have its own unique, specific skill set associated with the faction, which is nice about that part as well. And just like last time, we also have some unique rules for this gang specifically. So in this one, the gang that they have is basically Kim's, is the main focus for the House Escher rulebook. In the previous book, which was the House of Chains for House Goliath, their skill was basically on VAT genes, what they were doing. So basically genetic engineering, positive, negatives of genetic engineering for your Goliath fighters. You can really customize your fighters specifically on individual fighters. Narratively, that fit very well with the Goliaths because the Goliaths, as we know, are very Darwinistic in their viewpoints, and they strive to be the strongest and the best, which makes sense for individual fighters. It's all about individuality the strength that you have, the ability that you have. For the Escher, it looks like what their big thing is on chemistry and chemicals, genetic manipulation, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of rules about the type of ammo they could use, the types of drugs they could use as well to enhance their fighters, chemical weapons that they usually use as well. They also have terrain that's unique to their gang as well, just like we did in the House of Chains that we talked about that. So they also have that as well as some unique scenarios. And of course, they also have information about specific weapons and equipment that you have, which is basically for most of the part and parcel. It's mainly the same as it was from the regular gang book, but we have a few new entries in this, things like venom claws, for example, which are weapons that your death maidens use. We have bows and whips that the wild runners also use as well, so that could be be a little bit more important for that part. And then finally, of course, we have the gang tactics. And just like in the House of Chains, the gang tactics are you can roll up to see exactly what tactics you're bringing with you to the fight, which is kind of nice. You're not dependent upon buying a deck of cards to get those tactics. And actually, that's usually a big question a lot of people ask on my channel is like, Commander Cheapskate, do you and your gaming group use tactics? And for the longest time, we didn't, just because we didn't feel like spending additional money for the cards to use them, and you couldn't find them because they only made so many of them. And then went out of print really quick. Well, now the book solved this problem because now the gang specific tactics for your house is inside the book, so that part is kind of nice too. And of course, spread throughout, you also have brand new Dramatis Personae. And so this is basically what the concepts that we have for the book. So now we've gone over the entire overview of what the book contains. We're going to go and zero in on specific aspects of it and talk about exactly what's neat and what's new about the rulebook. So we'll be right back after this break. Alright, so now that we're done talking about the contents overall, let's go and just dial in for a couple of examples of some things you can see here. So for example, when you're creating your gangs, let's go and click on one of these. Let's go and talk about the gang queens real quick. So as you can see here, like they've changed the names a little bit of the different fighters in your gang. So for example, you have what's called a gang queen now, and that's the new name for the leader for the gang. So just like in the House of Chains, we actually have names for different characters now, for different fighters that we have throughout. And so there's an example of what they have. They kind of lay out just like they did before with their stats, their special rules associated with them. Also, we got their equipment as well as their skills. As you can see, we also have the beginning of the new finesse skill that is specific for these guys. All right, they tell you whether there's a primary or a secondary skill for each of these gangs as well. And of course, you got your list of personal equipment, things that they can buy. They've really revamped these lists quite a bit for individual fighters as well, which is actually kind of nice for that part. So that's just an example of some of the things that they end up happening. And not only that, but they also talk about their champions, for example. So for example, the gang matriarch, those are your champions. Same thing with your death maidens. Your death maidens actually count as champions for your gang as well. So if you want to include those in your gangs, you could do exactly the same thing for those guys as well. At the same time, you also have a brand new level, not a brand new level, what's what I'm looking for, a brand new type of fighter. There we go, that you can bring for your gangs. These are called the Wild Runners. And the Wild Runners, of course, are members of the gang that live out in the wild. They basically, live in the wild parts of the Underhive, kind of like, they're very much like the Artemis character from Greek mythology, the female Artemis, the goddess of the hunt for the Greeks. How she kind of run around all day and hunt animals and stuff. That's basically what these Escher Wild Runners basically do. And just like last time, they're also kind of like they have that prospect special rule, which has been associated to them. So just like how you had the what do you call those guys? The prospects for the House Goliath guys. I can't remember their name now. Anyways, ended up happening is that you have that whole idea of prospects. So your prospects are kind of like a step up between a juvie as well as a ganger in your gangs. It's kind of like the midway point between them. So they usually have a lot of unique things associated to them. And just like always, your juvies as well as your prospect makes up the consistency of your gang as well. So the gang consistencies have changed quite a bit. Originally, when you ran with the original rule books for the gang rule book from Necromunda, when you had a gang, you had to have more gangers within your gangs than you did any other type of fighter. So for every leader, champion, and juvie, and hanger-on, and brute that you had in your gang, you had to have another ganger just in your gang alone to do that. Well, they revamped the rules for that, starting with the House of Chains, with the Goliaths, and the same thing now with the Book of Blades, House of Blades on this one. So, for example, when we get to this little prospect rule here, so here's your Wild Runner, which is a new class right there. One of the things they talk about, of course, talk about promotion, of course, fast learner. They also talk about gang fighters. So what you end up happening now is that these gang fighter special rules, so long as you have members of that making up your gang, you're basically being free and clear on this part. So basically, the total number of fighters without this gang fighter rule, has to outnumber your hanger-ons and your brutes, for example. So you can hire a whole gang full of prospects if you want to. That's perfectly fine. Same thing with like your gang sisters, which are now your gangers. That's what they're called now. They're called sisters now. And of course, you have your juvies are called little sisters now, which is actually kind of cool. And the reason why that's kind of cool is because if you go back to the contents, when they talk about the guilds, for example, the water guild, for example, you could have like this big daddy little sister type of situation from like BioShock, which is actually kind of cool because the Nautican siphoning guilds, they have these big, huge diving suit guys that fight for them. You can attach a juvie to it to kind of create that aesthetic from BioShock for all those guys who are BioShock fans out there, which is actually kind of cool, which I'm planning on, which I think we kind of need to do for our gangs that we use for our studio. All right, but that's an example of that as well. We talk about the fear cats as well as the phalanx, which is the new animal that they run with. The wild runners, for example, have those characters. You could hire 3 of those for every wild runner that you have for your gang. And they have toxic attacks and all kinds of different things associated to that as well. And of course, you have your brand new hanger-ons as well. You have your typical ones like your gang lookouts, your dome runners, of course. They provide general rules for those guys. Same thing with house scum and bounty hunters and things like that, as well as house agents. That's probably one of the newest ones that they have on here. So for example, if we were to click on house agent, for example, they have a variable hiring fee. You can choose their stats, to choose their equipment. You roll randomly to see what kind of role they play for helping you out. So just like in the original, let me go back to that. Just like in the original House of Chains that we looked at earlier, it's exactly the same kind of process associated with that as well. So that's an example of how that's working out for the most part. So that part's kind of neat too. So going back to our contents here, let me go back to the top here. So that's an example of we start seeing that. We have this new hanger-on called the Apprentice Clan Chemist, which is basically like a person in training for the chemists that work for House Escher, which, like I said before, plays a huge role now within the gang. That part's kind of probably the most valuable type that you have. You also what's called a Shiver as well. It's another another hanger-on you can hire, and a Shiver is more like a cult witch, like a fortune teller. And they can give your gangs bonuses and stuff in future battles. So, it's very, very Mad Maxy with that whole like Shiver concept as well there. And of course, I talk about their alliances. But if you own the books from the Book of Peril, and if you own the book, the Book of Judgment, then you don't really need to go into these 2 editions in depth because that information is already provided. The only difference now is, of course, you have contacts with House Ulanti, is what ended up happening, which is actually kind of interesting because the rules associated with House Ulanti is that they're treacherous. So, like, at any moment, your alliance with House Ulanti could end because Ulanti is known for being backstabbing, backstabbing opportunists, and they sell out their contacts as easily as they, befriend them. So that's like a little neat mechanic you got to worry about for that as well. So other things that we also have, of course, is the chemistry rules. It's probably the most important, newest thing that's been added to it as well. So we have what's called Chem Alchemy is what they basically call it. And in this, what ends up happening is that you can buy stims, like you see here, for your fighters that they can take during to heal themselves and to use during the fight. As you see here, each of these, of course, provide different abilities and different positive and negative consequences for that as well. They also do exactly the same thing with the different types of ammunition that you have. For example, gaseous ammo, you have different effects for that. You have different effects for toxic ammo for things like needle guns and things of that nature as well. So because that becomes a huge, huge factor, and that helps out the gang for that part. So that part's kind of neat as well. Adds a lot of customization for your characters, especially with their chemical weapons. So things like their knives that they use, the stiletto blades, they have the toxin special rule. You can customize what kind of poisons and things are on those weapons. The Chemsith that your players use, they could also really adapt those so that way it gives your fighters different benefits and different penalties and things, depending on what you want to actually end up happening. So that part is especially really cool as that part as well. And of course, you got unique terrain pieces that go with it as well. I'm not going to spend too much on that part as well. You have 2 new scenarios that attach for the Escher Gang. One of them is like, for example, you hunt down a Chimerics, for example, is one that you have. So that's an example of some things that you have there as well. And of course, you also have your different stats for all your weapons and weapon traits and things of that nature as well. And so the Reckless trait, for example, where you attack everything within your field of view, that is being applied now to the Phalanx, which is the new creature that's available for the game to use. So that's an example of that as well. So it's really, really neat type of gaming system going on with this gang as well. Especially because you get like different bonuses for like the Cold Traders, for example, which is a criminal organization that smuggles in off-world and Xenos related materials. You can buy weapons from them or buy different things from them to use in your gang. So it's actually pretty cool, some of the differences that they have for this one as well. In the end, is this a good buy or not? In my opinion, this is an excellent buy, especially if you're going to be playing an Escher Gang in the future. Just like I said from my previous review on the House of Chains, these individual gang books is kind of like a soft, not I want to say soft reboot, it's more like a soft addition change to the Necromunda rule set. So the core game itself hasn't changed at all since the game came out, but the consistency of what's inside the gang, what the gang members can do, how you build them, the equipment they can use, the gear that they have, the fighters they can hire, these are all kind of like new. You have some of the old stuff that's in there, but they've kind of added on to it as well. So because that makes a nice little option for you to use that. So for example, if you want to play a House Escher Gang and you want to use the new rules of the House of Blades, a lot of the old rules still apply for them, but now you've just been enhanced. You have newer things that you can use, better fighters, different chemical effects for your weapons. It makes it really, really nice. So if you play a House Escher Gang, I highly suggest you buy the House of Blades and use this to help out your gang, help dominate in the Underhive, which is really nice as well. And I'm really happy that they're actually doing this. Eventually, it looks like they're going to be doing one of these books for each one of their gangs, so that'd be really, really cool as well. Now, as for balance, I've had one of my viewers had to put a comment wondering, hey, is it fair that the gang, some gangs have these books while other gangs don't? How's it stack up? I would still say it's still the same. It's not like by using these new things, you're going to be overly powering your opponent who doesn't have a book yet for their gang. Nothing like that. Just because, for example, in my own campaign, when the House of Chains came out, we were still playing the ruler rule set, and my friend decided to hire a prospect, Forgeborn. There we go. That was the name of the prospects for the House of Goliath guys. He hired a Forgeborn guy with a Storm Welder and used him. Yeah, it's powerful and stuff, but it's not like it's game breaking or anything. All it does just makes the game just more enhanced, is all it does. It has some challenges, but also some drawbacks as well. And there's some new things you gotta learn. It's kind of neat actually, so no complaint there. So yeah, it's definitely a good buy. I bought the digital version just because I don't want to buy the physical version, so that way I could keep bringing this with me everywhere I go. So that's the reason why I bought the electronic version. You could buy the basic version as well, order it from Gamesworkshop or your local gaming store or whatever the situation may be. Makes a really good buy on that one. So there you go, you guys. That's my review of the House of Blades. It's an excellent product, and I'm super excited to see exactly what the new rule books will be like for each of the different gangs coming out forward. I'm really looking forward to the House of Iron, because I'm playing a House Orlok gang in a future campaign coming up, and I'm really excited to see exactly what kind of change they have, because those gang bosses and those jetpacks that they showed in the Warhammer previews, those look legit. I'm not gonna lie, those look pretty awesome, and I'm super excited to see them using those in my gang and see how they work out. But yeah, that's gonna do it for this one, you guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. You guys' input is invaluable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest greatest hobby news related to our channel. That's good for this one, you guys. We'll catch you guys next one. Peace out and stay classy.